We finally have a scene in a John Wick movie where it wasn't raining, and they had to go to a desert to shoot it. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2019 action thriller film John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. It stars Keanu Reeves, Ian McShane, Halle Berry, Asia Kate Dillon, and Mark Dacascos, and was once again directed by Chad Stahelski. Chapter 3 sees Keanu Reeves reprising his role as John Wick, this time on the run from everybody. While attempting to survive the contract taken out against him, Wick seeks out redemption as well as, of course, some more revenge. It seems like action franchises these days are in a constant arms race with themselves. Each sequel needs to be a bigger and more impressive spectacle than the last, otherwise audiences aren't satisfied. There are some franchises that have really perfected the art of this perpetual ramp-up, and they've set the standard for what's expected in an action franchise at this point. After John Wick Chapter 2's bigger, bloodier approach, I had no doubt that Chapter 3 was going to be even bigger. I just wasn't sure what they were going to do to pull that off. The action and amazing fight sequences have consistently been the most impressive thing about the Wick franchise, and John Wick Chapter 3 is no different. Well, that's actually not the best phrasing because it is different here. Somehow it's bigger. Much, much bigger. The action in this third installment manages to make the original Wick film look almost tame by comparison. We get all the classic Wick stuff we love, like his gun fu moves and extremely fluid fighting style, but we also get creative and incredibly entertaining new things as well. Didn't get enough of Wick's driving during the last two movies? Okay, let's put him in a high-speed motorcycle chase with ninja assassins. Oh, and they have a sword fight during the chase. Not enough broken glass? Don't worry, the third act's got you covered. How about Halle Berry with some trained attack dogs? Sure thing. The concierge finally getting in on the action? Sounds good. Why don't we have the chairman from Iron Chef America do his best Yul Brynner impression? Okay, why not? This movie has several big fight sequences, but two of them in particular really stood out to me. The antique shop knife fight and the dog-assisted fight. The knife fight was great because it balanced things so well. Seriousness and humor, ridiculousness and realism. I mean, when's the last time you saw a movie knife fight where knives bounced off their target sometimes because they hit handle first? It was an incredibly fun and well-choreographed scene, just like the dog fight, which was able to incorporate highly trained dogs into the typical long take in full view style of John Wick action sequences. Chapter 3 took the action bigger, but it also expanded the story even more. We got a look into the international scale of the assassin underworld with the previous film, and got a better understanding of the importance of the rules of that world. Here, we're drawn into the inner workings of this world and given insight into who's actually governing it. The theme of rules and consequences, highlighted in Chapter 2, becomes even more of an essential driving force here, and we also finally get a brief look into the backstory and origins of Wick himself. Chapter 2 picks up right where Chapter 3 left off, and even with the world expansion, you can still simplify the story down to a few elements. The first half is basically a chase movie, and the second half is a standoff. Both plots have been used over and over again in action films, but the Wick franchise is once again capable of elevating the story beyond expectations. Speaking of expectations, for some reason I was under the impression that this was supposed to be the final chapter of John Wick's story, so I was a little surprised by the ending. He has served, he will continue to be of service. Parabellum indeed. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record here, but pro number one is the action. Just when you thought the franchise had reached its action peak, another Wick movie comes out that blows the last one out of the water. The choreography and stunt work remains superb, and this movie features even bigger, more creative sequences than its predecessor. The integration of animals, both horses and dogs, into the signature fighting style of Wick was both impressive and brilliant, and Halle Berry's performance as Sophia was just as fun to watch as Reeves. The knife fight and dog fight are both bound to become modern-day action classics. Pro number two is the plot. While I appreciated the expansion of the story in Chapter 2, I didn't find it extremely compelling, so I was happy to see that the additional expansion here actually tied things together in a meaningful way. Even better, this movie was able to hark back to some of the single-minded simplicity of the first movie, making it feel much more cohesive and focused. On the con side, I still don't have any major issues with this movie, but I do have to say I kinda started to feel the length with this one. It's only a bit over 2 hours long, but it did feel like some of the fights in the third act were really dragged out, which made it feel longer than it actually is. At this point, Wick's also taken on this sorta superhuman quality when it comes to his injuries. He takes some hard hits and stabs and shots in this movie. Plus, we've got to remember that only a week or two of time has passed since the beginning of the Wick story, so all his injuries from the previous two movies should also still be impacting him as they're healing. I know this movie isn't exactly based on a true story, but it's always had this sense of realism to it, and I think this movie really starts to push that boundary. And if you've watched my reviews for Chapter 1 and 2, I'm sure you can already guess what my other issue with this movie is. That's right, the subtitle style. More arbitrarily colored words. My favorite. I'm gonna give John Wick Chapter 3 4 out of 5 paws. As far as the action goes, this is up there with some of the best of the decade. The creativity and choreography are fantastic, and the story focus was also a nice return to form. I would recommend John Wick Chapter 3 to anybody who's a fan of great action. I think it's a little obvious to say fans of the Wick franchise, but they'll definitely get the most out of this movie. Unlike with Chapter 2, I think the plot of this one will be tougher to follow if you haven't seen the two previous movies, because it relies on the audience's knowledge of certain events, as well as the relationships between key characters. If you liked John Wick Chapter 3, I would recommend The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Now I know what you're thinking, a western from the 60s? I thought we were talking about Wick here. But this movie clearly served as an influence for all the Wick films, especially Chapter 3. The opening gun assembly moment of the antique store fight is a direct reference to a similar scene in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. There are quite a few Western musical cues throughout the third act, and come on, Wick rides a horse through New York City. Speaking of New York City, I would also recommend Escape from New York. It's an over-the-top dystopian sci-fi action movie, but it's basically a big chase movie like Wick 3, where absolutely anybody could be a threat. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite chase movie? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. I also wanted to say thank you for sticking through this review even though I'm sick. I know I probably don't sound that good, but thank you for watching anyway. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, and if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it so you can see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies, the way life should be.